Let's see here. Just gotta set everything up. And then we will get at it. Right hand, left hand, right hand, left hand. It's weird to see my image in the whole screen. That's bizarre. But hey, there you go. Alright. Let's see here. Just gotta share this old boy. Get that description. Oh. Shoot. There we are. Copy. Let's go back to the social media and we're gonna post it. Oh yeah, we're gonna post it so good. It's gonna be fantastic. Oh boy. Oh, I'm excited. It's gonna be brilliant. Alright, there we go. Alright. And let's get our links. Not as in the animal, but as in what I share. Alright, there we go. That's in there. I don't need to add that. I don't have the money to promote my post. But that's okay. Alright. Do a little editing on Twitch. Make sure it's not on gaming. Alright. My channel. Make sure it's quiet. Very nice. Alright, let's add this. Let's get this done. Actually, we'll keep reading fun. And it's honest, at least. Fantasy sports? Nah. What is this? What is it? Oh boy. Alright. Yep, stream language English, reading fun, wonderful. Alright, let's get at it. So, that's good. Turn on the multi-stream in case anyone wants to watch. Alright, okay. Let's get at it. Okay. So, we are reading the novel A Gathering of Ravens by Scott Oden. Dedicated for Steve Tompkins and Miguel Martins, the Shield brothers. To quote, "All fled, all done, so lift me on the pyre. The feast is over and the lamps expire." Robert E. Howard. He knew himself a villain, but he deemed the rest no better than the thing he'd seemed, and scorned the best as hypocrites who'd hid these deeds the bolder spirits plainly did. He knew himself detested, but he knew the hearts that loathed him crouched and dreaded too. Lone, wild, and strange, he stood alike, exempt from all affection and from all contempt. Lord Byron, the Corsair. Alright, so let us begin our novel. And unfortunately, I can't share with you the thing, but luckily, I can tell you that there's a very nice map in this book, and I recommend buying it. It is a wonderful read. Only $9.99 on Kindle. Beautiful. It's got a nice view of where it goes. Our settings are in the island of Zealand, which is off the coast of, it's one of the Danish Isles. And then the rest of the story takes place in Wessex, in southern England, as well as in Ireland. Yes. Alright, so let us begin. Book 1, The Isle of Zealand, the Danemark, the year of our Lord, 999. Chapter 1. A storm howled out of the west like a terrible voice of God, shouting down the heretics who doubted the coming apocalypse. The autumn had been warmer than it should, and Jarl, son of Hjalmar, who in the last year had forsworn the whale road, so he might carry the banner of the White Christ, knew he should not have trusted it would hold. The priest beckoned, yelling, that scrofulous bastard who preached conversion with the sword rather than the psalmster, had warned him that this ovader, this unweather, was of the devil's making. That the fumes of hell warned the world of man, and soon the armies of God would strike from the gates of heaven to set the balance right. A year ago, before his conversion, Njal would have dismissed the priest for a fool. He would have seen the heathen hand of Thor and the deafening crash of thunder and the jags of lightning crackling across the night-black sky, heard the false laughter of Ran in the pelting hail and the sheets of rain soaking him to the bone, and he would have sacrificed and called out to Odin for succor. But, like the blessed Apostle Paulos, the scales had fallen from Njal's eyes, and he could see the truth laid out before him. The power of the old gods was breaking, and the world's end was nigh, and not a treacherous lie. That was Ragnarok, with its false promises of glory and slaughter without end, but the day of judgment, when the white Christ would return and scour the earth of heathens and apostates and deniers of the Lord. And Hjalmar's son counted himself blessed to have received the gifts of salvation so close to the end. And thunder shook the heavens. Njal kept a tight grip on the halter of their donkey. The beast shied and threatened to bolt with every step, its eyes rolling with fear. Only the strength in his great shoulders, a legacy of the days he had gone raiding with Norway's king, Olaf Tryggva's son, kept the animal from plunging off the path and into the undergrowth, where the wind-stripped leaves faded from orange to red to a muddy brown in silent testimony to the coming winter. The path, hardly better than the cow's tail, led inland from the beach at Seal Reef. Roskilde was the destination. Once there, his companion Idun would take service with old Father Gunnar, and Njal would what? Simply wait the end days? Water sluiced from Njal's salt and pepper beard as he hauled on the rope lead. He tried to drag the blasted donkey, but the effort only gouged furrows in the mud. His feet slipped on wet rock. He nearly fell. Njal railed at the animal, his voice lost to the roaring wind. "Damn you, you miserable beast! I swear if we reach Roskilde, I'm going to skin you and make a pair of boots from your flea-bitten hide." For a moment, Njal considered backtracking to the beach, to ride out the storm in the moss-grown ruins of the shield of the old stone tower there, a relic of the days when the kings of the Shield Danes ruled over Sealand. But Seal Reef was a good 2 hours or more behind, when Roskilde was a day, perhaps 2 ahead. No, they needed shelter. Here, now. There was a lull in the rain. The echo of thunder rolled from horizon to horizon. Njal glanced about, seeking Idun, the irrepressible young Briton, who for the last year had helped guide the Dane through the darkness and into the light of the Christ, was ahead of him, clambering up the rock and scrub of the hillside. Njal frowned. "Idun!" Idun turned. The gale snatched off his cowl, revealing a shock of hair the color of dark copper and not a hint of a beard. He bent into the fierce wind. His black woolen mantle flapped like the vestigial wings as he pointed to something a short way up the slope. There, partially hidden by hawthorn and bramble, was the yawning mouth of a cave. Njal waved him back. Though secure in his newfound faith, the Dane had not lost the superstitions of his heathen kin. He had yearned He had learned from a young age that a cave like that might shelter any number of fell creatures. Beyond bears or wolves, witches could meet there in conclave to weave the songs that wrought the doom of good men. Trolls, wights, and goblins might lurk in the shadows, ready to seize unwary travelers. The spreading word of God might keep the evils of the forgotten world at bay, but it could not destroy them completely. Njal shouted at the younger man, cold dread seeping into his bones. "It's not safe!" "Safer than walking in this wreck," Aiden replied, his voice high and sharp like that of a castrato. Before Njal could respond, Aiden scrambled up the slope, slipped behind the hawthorn thicket, and vanished into the mouth of the cave. Njal reeled off a long and very unchristian litany of curses. He did not dare leave the donkey to its own devices. One sharp crack of thunder, and they would not see their belongings again until they reached Roskilde, if then. Njal's curses redoubled, and as he manhandled the beast up the slope, despite the chill and the rain soaking him to the bone, sweat dripped from his brow by the time he reached the stand of the hawthorn. The god-cursed animal balked at entering the cave, so Njal compromised. He tied the donkey's lead rope as tightly as he could to the thickest branch he could find, pausing to dig a bearded axe with a short oak haft from his gear, the skegox he had carried on the whale road. Njal charged in through branch and bramble, half expecting to see nothing left of Aiden but bloody shreds. But Njal's war cry died on his lips, his charge to death and glory arrested by a distinct lack of foes. Indeed, the slender young man stood whole and unscathed inside the mouth of the cave. He looked over his shoulder at Njal, blue eyes daring the wet and bedraggled Dane to reprimand him. Though Aiden's cheeks were ruddy and wind-burned, his features were as fine and as delicate as any woman's. Njal might have marked him for a lesser son of nobility had he not known better. "God loves a fool," Njal muttered, breathing hard. "That's the only reason I can fathom why you're not dead yet." Aiden grinned. "God also helps those who help themselves, which is why we now have shelter from the storm." Caves were a rarity in Sealand, and this one, Njal could see, was rarer still. It was gigantic. It could have easily held the burial mound of Gorm the Old back in Yelling. The cave entrance hung like a ledge in the wall of a mine shaft. Oh, pardon me. I'm just going to take care of one thing here. There we go. Ah. There we are. The cave entrance hung like a ledge in the wall of a mine shaft. Gray light and rain trickled down from the scrub-choked fissure 20 feet over their heads, the water dropping down to pool in the corner of the cave floor, some 30 feet below them. A trio of stunted hawthorn trees grew at the edge of the pool. Nothing but a dead husk stood like a naked caricature of its brothers. How far back the cave stretched, Njal could not apprehend. For its farthest reaches lay cloaked in darkness. He wondered if this might be the lair of the dragon that slew and was slain by old Bodvar, the Geat, who made himself king of the Shield Danes. Though given over to the Christ, Njal felt his once heathen blood stir at the thought of testing the edge of his axe against the scales of a great worm. That would be a good death. Aiden shuffled close to the edge and peered down at the pool. Why doesn't it flood? Drains out through the chinks in the rock, I'd wager. Njal sniffed the air. It was damp and musky with a faint metallic animal reek that reminded him of a badly tan leather jerkin worn under a chain hauberk. To the right of the entrance, a series of rock shelves like stairs. Stair steps carved by dwarves led down to the cave floor. Njal tested them. They were slick with moisture, but solid. The Dane descended first, axe held loosely in his fist. His free hand brushed the cave walls. Under his fingers, he could feel scratches and grooves. "Runes," he said, his voice echoing. Aiden looked closer. "Here's a word in Latin, I think." "What does it say?" "What does it say?" The youth tilted his head this way and that, rising on his toes as he tried to get a better view of the faint inscription. Orcadai. Perhaps. Maybe Orcades. Orkney? Aiden shrugged. Hard to tell. Could be. Jags of white light flashed from overhead. In an answer, thunder she seemed to shake the very ground. By the time they reached the last step, a fresh deluge was pouring from the fissure. Chains of lightning made bright the gloom of the cave. By the brilliant flares, Njal could see another sigil chiseled deep in the wall. An eye, its slitted pupil, like that of some monstrous serpent. The giant Dane shuddered. "What bandit's lair is this?" "Doesn't matter," Aiden replied. "God has granted us a dry place of respite from the storm. Would you turn your nose at a gift from the Almighty?" Njal glared up at the eye. The crude savagery of its carving left him uneasy. Like a memory of something whispered warning from his childhood. He glanced around, half expecting a fork-tailed devil to leap from the shadows. Satan owns front porch is no gift. Aiden chuckled, shaking his head. "Come, turn your axe on that dead tree so we can have a fire going. Oh, Seatar, poor donkey. I think you will better appreciate the Lord's generosity with dry clothes, warm feet, no hot meal in your belly." Njal grumbled, but in short order, the two had built a small campsite against the cave wall, near the rising steps. No amount of coaxing, however, would convince the donkey to move deeper into the relatively dry cave mouth. Taking pity on the trembling beast, Aiden unloaded their possessions. 2 woven reed panniers, their contents wrapped in sealskin, and left the donkey hobbled and tied by the cave entrance, along with a measure of oats and a bucket of water drawn from the pool below. The fire crackled to life, lending warmth and a little light to their corner of the cave. When Njal busied himself with setting a hank of salted pork and to roast over the flames, Aiden took his spare clothing and moved off to the far side of the cave, out of sight, to change. When he returned, he laid his wet garments out to dry. Njal followed suit, a ritualized sort of modesty that seemed natural between the two of them. When Njal was gone, Aiden fished some bread and cheese and a handful of dried apples from their gear, along with a flask of watered mead, and prepared them each a plate of food. The smell of roasting pork and the sizzle and pop of the fat made Aiden's mouth water. Deeper, deeper, and stirring the fire, he felt a faint breeze coming from deeper in the cave, like the exhalation of some great beast. He was staring at the darkness behind them when Njal came back. "How deep under the earth do you think this cave goes?" he asked the Dane, who knelt and spread his own wet clothes out alongside Aiden's. Njal glanced at the rear of the cave and shrugged. "Only God knows. We should investigate. Not until I have the warm feet and belly full of food you promised. You spoke of. My apologies." Njal sat on the lower step, Idun handed him a plate, and both men bowed their heads as Idun recited the Lord's Prayer. His mixed accents, English and Danish, mangling its Latin phrases. At the end, both of them muttered, "Amen," and with a nod they fell upon their food. "Who made that, you think?" Idun asked, jerking his narrow chin at the eye sigil. "And what does it mean?" "An ogre, like as not," Njal said, around a mouthful of pork. "My grandfather told me caves like this were hacked out of the earth by the sons of Ymir, foul beasts who drink out of the earth who drink the blood of good Christians." My apologies. Let me read that sentence over. "My grandfather told me caves like this were hacked out of the ground by the sons of Ymir, foul beasts who drink the blood of good Christians." Njal paused. He swallowed, and then fixed Aiden with an iron-hard stare. "Are you a good Christian?" They will ask you this once you reach Roskilde. They will ask how you came to be here. They will ask you about your home, your people, and why you left a place as sacred as Glastonbury to join a wretched little church that is 2 hairs shy of the asshole of the world. And they will ask if you cleave to our Lord's commandments. How will you answer? Idun didn't flinch. This was an old game between them, preparation for taking up a life of holy service, when truth and circumstance did not match one another precisely. "I will answer with alacrity," Idun replied, "and silently implore God to forgive the lies that must escape my lips. I will tell them the tale of Red Njal Hjalmar's son, who captured me in the sack of Exeter and forced me into a life of vile servitude. I will tell them how the power of the Redeemer turned Njal from his heathen ways, and how I, because of my upbringing in Glastonbury, helped set that once vicious reaver's heart on the path of the one true God. And I will tell them that with the end times upon us, I came east with you so that we might spread the gospel amongst your godless kin." Njal nodded. "But what if they discover your true nature? What if you fall in love with one of your brother monks, and he rejects your advances? What then?" I don't know," Idun said with an exacerbated sigh, wary all of a sudden. He rose and took Njal's empty plate. "I don't care for such things. Not at Glastonbury. Certainly not at Exeter. And not now. I only know this. I won't live as I did before. And I want to serve the Lord in what time remains to us. Nothing else matters." Njal nodded. "Pray that will be enough." Idun carried their dishes to the pool and rinsed them in the stream of rainwater falling from above. He heard rumbles of muted thunder as distant lightning yet cast its white glare over the hillsides. Idun peered up through the fissure outside. The night had fallen and a chill had settled upon the land. At dawn it would be frigid. Idun turned and shuffled back to their fire. The youth looked longingly at the hinterlands of the cave, its shadow-cloaked mystery, crying for resolution. Maybe a little exploration before bed. A flare of lightning cast its glare, and as Idun watched, the light illuminated a figure, etched it against the darkness with startling clarity. Something shaped like a man, savage and barbaric. Something that moved. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph! Idun dropped the plates. He trod on the hem of his robe, tripping and scrambling over the rock in his haste to get back to the fire. Christ almighty! Iden's cry startled Njal, who had settled against the now warm wall with his eyes closed. He lurched to his feet and hefted his axe. What ails you? The youth gestured to the darkness at the rear of the cave. His voice, when he found it, was a terrified hiss. We are not alone. There's someone back there. I swear it. A man, surely. Njal's eyes narrowed. Stay behind me. He reached down, drew a brand from the fire, and held it aloft. Wood crackled and sparked. Embers drifted on the faint breath of air. Njal too saw something move. His makeshift torch revealed a glint of iron, the swirl of a wolf pelt, and then nothing. He tensed, ready for the rush of a foeman. His axe felt once more like an extension of his arm. If I say run, you run. Do you hear? He muttered to Iden, who nodded. Njal drew himself up to his full height and bellowed into the darkness. Who goes? If you be a thief, we are but poor sons of Christ. We have nothing. Show yourself. The echo of Njal's challenge died away. He strained to hear some sound, a clink of metal on stone, a hissed breath, something. But there was nothing save for the dull rumble of thunder and the splash of rain. He was on the verge of calling out again when a voice answered from the gloom. A voice as hard as knapped flint that spoke the tongue of the Danes with an accent Njal could not place. Yeah. You have food, poor sons of Christ? Aye, little enough for our own needs, but what we have we will share with you. At what price? We ask nothing in return. Our charity is the charity of Christ, Njal said. My brother here will fetch you a plate. Iden. Njal heard a shuffling sound, followed by a harsh laughter. Brother, is it? There was a derisive noise just then, halfway between a growl and a cough. I'll play your little game, poor son of Christ. I have crossed paths with many a Dane in my day. Spear Danes and shield Danes, bright Danes and ring Danes, West Danes and South Danes, but never a Christ Dane. The voice filled the epitaph with a sense of scorn. Do you Christ Danes still follow the ancient laws of hospitality? We do, Njal replied. And did I sneak past you like a thief in the night, Christ Dane? Njal ground his teeth. No. I don't understand, Iden said. The youth shot Njal a confused glance. Then understand this, little fool. The voice grated like iron on a whetstone. This cave is mine. I marked it with the eye. You trespass, disturb my rest, drink my water, and cut down my trees. And you have the spleen to call me your guest? We meant no offense, Iden said. We did not know this cave belonged to you. Still cloaked in shadow, the figure laughed once more. There was no humor in his voice. I claim ignorance and blindness, for is that not your way? Keep your nailed God's charity. I will trade you my hospitality for your food. Do we have a bargain? Njal considered the offer. In the past, he would have simply trusted his axe to win the day and taken what he needed as spoils of battle. But those days were over. He was a man of peace now, Perhaps this was a divine test of his patience, of the strength of his new faith. Surely he could pass the night with a surly heathen in exchange for warmth, shelter, and the blessing of the Lord. Slowly he let his axe fall to his side and nodded. "We have. I am Jarl, son of Hjalmar. My companion here is Aiden of Glastonbury. We are bound for the church in Roskilde. How are you called?" The figure moved nearer to the circle of light by the traveler's fire. The thunder had faded. The rain was a soft hiss. Weak flares of lightning revealed little more than a twisted silhouette. Gnarled limbs bulging with muscles and sinew. "I am called many things, Christ Dane, Corpse Maker, and Life Quencher, the Bringer of Night, the Son of the Wolf and Brother of the Serpent. I am the last of Baelger's blood, called Grimnir by my people." Aiden backed over to the panniers and drew out some bread and cheese. A bit of pork remained, as well as an apple, wrinkled and sweet. He glanced up as he worked, curious as to what kind of man this Grimnir was. Who are your people? But what stepped from the shadows was not human. The flickering firelight through the same construction as a human face. Its planes and angles were long and sharp, vulpine in the half-light of the cave. Coarse black hair woven with gold beads and discs of carved bone, framed eyes like splinters of red-hot iron set deep in a craggy brow. He was broad of chest and long of arm, slouch-backed in his posture, with tattoos and cinder and woad snaking across his swarthy hide. Grimnir was clad in antiquated splendor, a sleeveless hauberk of iron rings sewn onto black leather, a kilt of poorly tanned horsehide cut from the flanks of a dappled roan, a cloak of wolfskins, and arm rings of gold, silver, and wrought iron. One black-nailed hand rested on the worn ivory hilt of a long sayaxe. Aiden was taken aback, but Njal reacted as though he had been struck. He brought up his axe. No longer was he a man of peace in the service of God. Rather, he was a Dane facing an ancestral enemy. Christ's mercy! Skralinger, I name you! Back, child of Satan! You would forget your truce, Christ Dane! Grimnir's voice was full of cold malice. He shifted his weight, balancing on the balls off his feet, like a predator ready to spring. There can be no truce with an enemy of God. Booger your God! Oh, now this is kind of towards the middle of it. Also, hey, what's up? Would you like me to begin at the beginning of the chapter? I can give you a fair approximation of where we are, leading you kind of into it. So I will give you a little synopsis of what happened. 2 Christian pilgrims are traveling across the island of Zealand in the Denmark of Denmark, tormented and buffeted by the winds and rains of a deep, strong storm. Of course, they happen upon a cave, a massive, well taken care of cave, much like a mine shaft, with carved stairs going down deeper and deeper, with a pool of water. After creating a fire, warming themselves, disrobing, and making a meal, they happen upon a figure coming out of the depths of the ancient enemies of the Danes, a Skralinger, what we know in modern English, thanks to the great master J.R.R. Tolkien as an orc. The Dane prepares himself to battle, and we are at standoff. All right, here we go. Let us continue. But before Njal and Grimnir could come to blows, Idun thrust himself between the two, with no thought of his own safety. "Stop, both of you! Is it not written that we should love the sinner, though we despise the sin?" Njal hesitated. "This is no mere sinner, Idun. It is not even a man. It comes from a race of traitors and oath-breakers and defilers of corpses. And so, were not your own people once described as no less despicable terms? How runs the prayer, brother? It was once on the lips of every God-fearing man, from Britain to Byzantium. Do you recall it?" The stinging condemnation in Idun's voice dampened Njal's anger. "Aye, deliver us, O God, from the savage race of Northmen." Njal lowered his axe, teeth grinding with the effort. Though he might struggle with it every day until the end of days, he was a man of God now, and not some blood-mad heathen. Not any longer. When he spoke again, his voice was constrained. "Thank you for reminding me. You are wise beyond your years and a Christian without equal, brother. Forgive me, Grimnir. We are ill guests to abuse your hospitality, so will you not join us?" Grimnir's narrowed eyes slid from man to youth and back again. He was plainly suspicious of them, but with an agonizing slowness he nevertheless took his hand from the hilt of his sayax. "Tonight we eat, and you will sleep in peace. But come the dawn, I might just split your miserable skull, Christane." Njal picked up the plate of food and held it out to Grimnir. "Fair enough," he replied. "If that is God's will, so be it." With a fierce grin, Grimnir accepted the food and joined the two travelers by the fire. Chapter 2. The world beyond the cave had grown silent with the fullness of night. A wind moaned inland from the sea, driving a shoal of fallen leaves before it, and rattling the branches of the hawthorn trees. The clouds overhead shredded to reveal the gleaming lamps of heaven, closer and brighter now that the ending of the world drew nigh. Inside the cave, Njal and Idun knelt on the cold stone floor before a small cross carved from an old spruce oar of a dragon ship. The youth led them in prayer, reciting the words by rote, even as his mind dwelt on the creature whose cave they shared. Grimnir had squatted on his haunches, his hair a stringy veil from which rust-red eyes gleamed suspiciously. He sniffed at each bite as though he expected it to be poisoned. Idun had 1,000 questions for the... What had Njal called it? Skralinger? But all that had been forestalled when the old man declared he needed to pray before taking his rest. Grimnir had snarled and spat when Idun brought out the cross, as though the sign of it pained him. He loudly and profanely cursed their faith as mummery, and wanted no part of it. Idun could hear him even now, relieving himself beyond the hawthorns, screening the mouth of the cave, and, if Idun's ears could be trusted, singing. Grimnir's flinty voice filtered down, tuneless and unlovely. "Brothers shall strive in slaughter, sisters shall sin together. Ill days among men, an axe age, a sword age, shields will be cloven. A wind age, a wolf age, ere the world totters." He heard Njal mutter, "Amen," and quickly added his own. The Danes stood, while the Aiden carefully wrapped their carved cross and stowed it in their gear. Njal went over and stoked the fire. He rubbed his eyes. "That song he sings, Idun said, crouching by the panniers. "Do you know it?" "Aye. It is a song the heathen sing of Ragnarok," Njal replied, frowning. "What my people call the end of the world." The old man resumed his place against the cave. Cave wall, his axe beside him. Idun passed him a blanket, then set about preparing a place where he would sleep. Smoke coiled and drifted out of the fissures as Grimnir's song faded. The end of days weighed heavily in Idun's mind. Somewhere in the world beyond, sowing the seeds of... Let me start that sentence over, sorry. Somewhere in the world beyond, in this very night, the Antichrist stalked the earth, sowing the seeds of its destruction and drawing all of its evil nature and intent to him. In his mind, Idun knew this to be true. For was it not written in Revelation? And did not the blessed Abbot Elfric of Eynsham determine this year to be the great year, the year of the last judgment? Why then did Idun not feel in his heart the jubilation that surely must come from the nearness of the Lord? The Christ would return by year's end. Mind you, this is the year 999. But Idun could not sense anything special about each day that passed. The wars had not increased in number, nor had tribulations grown more than what was special known. What each man's lot to bear. Lands where crops had failed suffered famine, while their neighbors might fill their larders and barns nigh to bursting with the bounty of the Lord. Idun saw neither rhyme nor reason to this. He could not accept the idea that perhaps the learned abbot of Eynsham was wrong in naming this as the great year, but surely not the revelation to John. It was infallible, was it not? Idun stirred from his reverie. I did not know heathens believed in the end times too. Aye, they do, Njal replied, though it is not like ours. They believe Ragnarok will be a time of glory and endless war, when the gods issue forth from Asgard to battle the Jotun, their sworn foes. Their struggle will break the world. It is an ancient tale. You know, Idun said after a moment, this Grimnir reminds me of your old shipmates. He has the same godless exuberance. We Danes can at least find redemption. His folk are beyond even that. Idun's brow furrowed. Surely there is no man who is beyond redemption. I told you, that thing is no man. I thought so too. When I first saw him, he looks like, the youth struggled to find the words, like no man I've ever seen. But he does have 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head as we do. He breathes as we do, eats as we do, drinks, spits, laughs, and curses as we do. If we judge him on his appearance alone, then I would concede your point. But how is he not a man? And this name you have for him, Skrælingr, I have never heard it. I expect not. It is as old as Ragnarok, but there is a word in your tongue. Orkneas. Have you heard that one? It describes a monster of great evil, an ogre who stalks fen and marsh and eats the flesh of the dead. They are one and the same. Idun looked to the older man as though he had gone daft. I know that name. Orkneas were enemies of God, children of Cain. who fought long against the Almighty. Grimnir can't be one of those. God banished them from his sight. Honestly, Njal, what game is this? You name him something he cannot be? It is no game, Njal replied. You say these Orkneyas strove against God and were banished? So it was with the Skraelingar. My grandfather told me many times about these wolves of the north, these children of Loki, who rebelled against Odin and were cast down here to Midgard to plague the sons of man. Banished from the sights of God? Njal nodded. So we will tell the monks at Roskilde that as we journeyed, we passed a night in a cave with a creature of legend, a monster? The older Dane smiled, though even Idun could see it was forced. The smile of an adult indulging a child's whim. You will find that if you live as long as I have, that even the most outlandish of tales have a tiny grain of truth in their heart. And from that grain the minds of men can make fabulous pearls. When we first looked upon this cave, a part of me wondered if it might be the lair of the dragon slain by old King Budvar of the Shield Danes. No doubt the monks at Roskilde would laugh at me for this, since surely they believed dragons to be the bailiwick of children, scalds, and fools. But I am no addle-headed poet. I've seen the skull of a great worm at Borghund. It was harder than stone and brimming with knife-like teeth, so they must have existed. Likewise, I've never laid eyes upon one of the Skraelingar till now, but I've seen their bones and heard the tales of my kin, so I know this one for what it is. Grimnir's folk were the bane of my people for a dozen generations and more. They raided our villages, striking at night while we slept, killing our men and our children, and making off with our women and our possessions. An old chieftain named Hroar made the Danes fight as one people, and they finally broke the Skraelingar, though it cost Hroar his life. In truth, it has been many long years since anyone has seen one. My grandfather thought them gone from this land. Grimnir's voice caught them off guard. So quiet was he that neither man had heard his approach. Hroar, that old swine, got what was coming to him. He rose from a crouch, where he'd been listening to their conversation, and descended to the cave floor. He made a hissing noise and fixed Njal with a belligerent stare. And you yammer on about things beyond your reckoning, Christ Dane. The Kaurar were brought board of the sly ones. Ymir was our sire, and the black blood of Angerbold runs hot in our veins. Njal ignored him. Idun glanced between the two, his brow furrowed. Forgive me, he said after a moment. What are Kauna? To you, I am Orkneyas. To the Dane, I am Skraelingar. The blasted Irish would name me Fumorak, the Grimnir said, then smote his breast with one black-nailed fist. But I am Counter. Do you understand now? Idun flinched at the vehemence in Grimnir's voice. He nodded. And are there many more of your people left? Nar! I am the last. Grimnir snatched up his cloak, wrapping the old wolf skin around his shoulder, and then sat just outside the ring of firelight with his back to the pool. His eyes gleamed like red coals. I made the death song for old Giffer, who was my mother's brother, back in that bastard Charles Magnus's day. Not seen another of my kind since. When I am gone. Grimnir trailed off. But Idun cleared his throat. But Charles Magnus ruled the Franks nigh upon 200 years ago. Forgive me again, but just how old do you claim to be? Grimnir shrugged. How do you reckon your age? Idun ducked his head, his cheeks coloring. I do not rightly know, he replied. The monks at Glastonbury say I was left upon their doorstep one snowy Yule. I have seen my 20th year. To be sure, perhaps more.
A foundling, eh?
Grimnir shifted his baleful gaze to Njal.
A new Christine.
I am hard upon my 50th year.
Striplings, the lot of ye.
Grimnir's nostrils flared.
I first drew breath at Orcag.
Let me try that word again.
Orcahauger, in the Kjoln Mountains, in the last days of the Peace of Frodi.
His lips skinned back, revealing a fierce, serrated grin.
My birth was a harbinger of strife and shield breaking.
Impossible, Idun barked. Our host is playing us for fools, brother. Frodi's peace lasted as long as our Lord's Christ stay on this earth. That would make our friends here at least 1,000 years old. Idun expected protestations from the giant Dane. Scoffing laughter? Something. Njal, however, remained silent. Idun saw not even a shadow of doubt darken his bearded visage. You believe him? Grimnir leaned forward, his eyes glittering with a dangerous light.
You call me for a liar?
A liar? Idun said quickly, holding his hands up to forestall Grimnir's anger. No, I did not mean it like that. It's just, while I concede that you are not like us, a man descended from the loins of blessed Adam, to believe you are over 1,000 years old is something else entirely. Only Christ is immortal.
Man, eh?
Grimnir chuckled, like a spring uncoiling. Oh, sorry, that's a fair point. Alright, let me see here. Yeah, it's still pretty high. Okay, I'm going to lower it down. Right there. Yeah, and that's the peak of the mic for the microphone. Okay. Thank you for the advice. I lowered it down a bit. It's about mid-range. And I am speaking right into it, so I'm hitting it hard. Alright, back into the story.
Believe what you will, little foundling. It matters nothing to me. Have you any more of that cat piss you call mead?
Idun handed him the near-empty flask. He watched as Grimnir drained it. Njal leaned back against the wall, his eyes closed, one fist tightly around the haft of his axe. Though by the laws of hospitality he should be safe this night, as if he slept under the roof of his kin. Idun lowered his voice. We are bound for Roskilde, to spend what time we have left preparing for the end of days, and to spread the message of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ to those poor souls among the Danes, who yet kneel before pagan gods. Is this your home? Idun indicated the cave with a jerk of his head. Grimnir stared at this fire, as though reading an omen in its crackling heart.
For the winter I came south from Skana, seeking an old enemy, a worm who owes me weregild.
Though on the verge of sleep, this nevertheless caught Njal's ear. He raised an eyelid.
Revenge is mine, the Lord says, and I will repay it in due time.
Grimnir's wolfish face twisted into a mask of malevolence, lips peeled back in a snarl of contempt.
You're a paltry little god, best keep his hands off what's mine. Especially this one, wretched maggot who calls himself Bjarki. Bjarki Halfdane. May the serpent twist his guts. He hides from me, but I will find him, and when I do, that foul oath breaker will pay.
Bjarki Halfdane, eh? Grimnir's eyes snapped up.
You've heard of him?
Njal shifted to a more comfortable position. More than that, I know him. Ugly bastard, and too smart for his own good by far. Before I gave my life to Christ, I took the whale road with Olaf Tryggva's son. Bjarki sailed with us. Idun listened as though Njal told Grimnir of the raids he had made under the Olaf's banner. the same Olaf who was now Norway's king. For years, Njal had slaughtered, plundered, and raided from Frisia to the Hebrides and down to the coast of Wessex in England, where he sacked the rich town of Wareham and put its lord Prince Eothred to the sword. This Bjarki, Idun heard, fought alongside them until the Scilly Isles, off the coast of Cornwall.
That's where Olaf broke with the old ways and
became a Christian, Njal said. Now Bjarki thought of himself as a Gothi, a priest, and he took Olaf's conversion as hard. They'd sworn a pact to Odin. Bjarki claimed Olaf broke it when he repudiated the Allfather. The rest of us tried to broker peace between them. But harsh words often lead to harsher blows. Bjarki came against Olaf one morning before sunrise and dealt him a grievous wound before we could drive him off. He escaped by the skin of his teeth, him and a small crew. That was... The Dane did a quick sum on his fingers. 4, maybe 5 years back, and he's not seen in the north since. Not with King Olaf nursing a grudge. Njal yawned. I left the Whale Road last year, after the sack of Exeter, and became a Christian myself. As far as I know, Bjarki still haunts the waters off the English coast, somewhere between the tip of Cornwall and the mouth of the Thames.
He does, eh?
Grimnir spat into the fire.
I'll find him.
He glanced sharply at Idun, red eyes boring into him.
You're English. You know the lay of the land and speak the tongue better than I do. You come with me.
Idun's face hardened at the mention of returning to his native land. He met Grimnir's gaze with blue eyes as cold and bitter as hoarfrost. A Jew will sit on St. Peter's throne before I ever touch English soil again. Perhaps a guide can be found for you in Rothskilde. Grimnir sucked his teeth, the corner of his mouth curling up in a sneer.
Rothskilde? Bah!
Then may God bless your journey, Idun said. He looked to Njal, who had dropped off to sleep. It is late. We must arise early and take the road. We thank you for your hospitality. Grimnir grunted. He pulled his wolfskin cloak tighter and rolled over his back to the fire. Idun shrugged, fed the flames another bundle of dry hawthorn branches, and stretched out, head cradled in his arm. It only took a few moments for the youth to drop off, his measured breathing joining with the snores rippling from the giant Dane. Unseen by either man, the Skrailingur raised his head. He looked back at Njal and Idun, and up to the cave's entrance, where their donkey shifted and stamped. He nodded to himself. Sinking back down, he stared, gimlet-eyed and cruel, up through the fissure in the star-flecked sky, and mimicked the deep breath of sleep. Let's see what happened next in Chapter 3. Idun wakes to the sound of iron nails clawing on stone. He lies in darkness, unmoving. The faint light that filters down into the hearts of the cave is gray and cold. He hears it again. Something heavy, pulling itself along the floor. Idun raises his head slightly, pulling. The shape moves in the gloom. At the back of the cave, something gnarled and blighted, its black fingers scrabbling for purchase on cold stone. The stench of putrefaction runs before it like a gale before a squall. Though eyes half open, not daring to breathe, he watches the thing creep into the light. An impossible thing. A thing that should not be. Gnarled limbs and a bloated belly. Knife-like teeth gleaming from a black thatch of beard woven with thorn and bramble. Lifeless eyes, hollow and accusing, pierce Idun to his core. You cannot hide! The thing hisses, its voice familiar to Idun. It was the voice of a man from Exeter. A hateful man who had been dead for more than a year now. Godwin. You cannot hide, my sweet little whore.
Come back to me!
Idun screams as the thing's hard, nailed fingers close around his ankle. The youth bolted awake, gasping. A name and a prayer, both half formed, on his lips. God! Wild-eyed, he cast about for the thing that was menacing him. Idun sat on the frigid cave floor, his breath steaming. Morning light lanced down from the overhead fissure to sparkle on the surface of the pool. Pain lanced down his spine, and he could yet feel the skin of his ankle tingling where the dream thing had grabbed him. The youth ran a hand through his short coppery hair. Their fire had burned down to a bed of embers. On the other side of it, Njal lay under his blanket, still gently snoring. Idun fought the urge to wrap his own blanket back around himself and snatch another hour's sleep. But it was surely time to be up and about. He stretched and turned and saw Grimnir staring at him from the shadows. An impossible thing, a thing that should not be. He had his sayax drawn and was tending to the rune-etched blade with a whetstone. "How long has the sun been up?" Idun muttered. Grimnir dropped the stone along the blade's edge, a slow and precise rasp, the sound of iron nails clawing on stone. When his inhuman eyes flickered over to the youth, Idun felt the skin on the back of his neck crawl. The previous night's conviviality was gone. Now there was a hatred in his gaze that Idun could not fathom.
"An hour,"
he hissed.
"Maybe less."
Idun gave a nervous chuckle. Aren't we a pair of layabouts? I'll build up a fire and make a bit of breakfast, then rouse Njal. Hot food.
"Best go catch your beast first."
Grimnir gestured up to the cave mouth with the point of his sayax. The donkey was gone. It chewed through its halter.
And headed down the road.
Idun clapped a hand to his forehead. God's teeth! That animal will be the death of me. He sprang up and headed to the stairs. Could you have not stopped it from escaping? Grimnir shrugged.
"I could have."
For the love of God, why didn't you? The Skrailander smiled. There was humor in the gesture, but it was not good-natured or well-meaning. Rather, Idun got the impression that he was playing a malicious little prank upon the travelers.
"Keep talking, little fool,"
Grimnir said.
"Your ass will be in Roskilde long before you."
Laughing, he returned his attention to his sayax. Idun bit back a reply and hurried to the entrance of the cave. Sparing no thought for the length of the rope that remained, Idun pushed through the screen of hawthorn and down into the frigid morning light. Grimnir heard him call the animal's name. Oh, this is chapter 4, by the way. Grimnir heard him call the animal's name, the young fool's voice fading as he skidded down the slope of the road. Then, with a final susurration of stone on steel, he stood. Grimnir wiped his blade on his kilt, sheathed it, and fixed Njal's sleeping form with a look that could curdle milk. He walked over and kicked the Dane's feet.
"Who there, you miserable sluggard? Up, we have business, you and I."
Njal mumbled a curse. Grimnir kicked him again.
"Up, down, damn you."
"God rot your bones, Skrailander," Njal muttered. "Touch me again and I'll twist your pox-ridden head off."
"Try it, you fat-bellied hymn singer. Up, you lout."
Njal pulled himself into a sitting position. He rubbed his eyes and glanced around the cave. Suddenly, he stiffened. "Where's Idun?" Grimnir laughed, the sound like stones sliding into the grave.
"I sent you little whore outside. A smart bastard you are. Very smart. Hacking off her hair, making the slut wear the rags of a poor son of Christ. Almost fooled me. Where you bound for, in truth? Do you take her to the slave markets to the east, or back to your steading? Does she know what you have in store for her?"
"You're addled!" Njal said. He stood and pushed past Grimnir, shuffling along to the pool where he knelt and splashed ice-cold water in his face. Idun's a good man, destined to join the Order of Saint Benedict, and we are bound for Rothskilde, like we said.
Liar! She bleeds! Her moon is upon her! I can smell it.
Grimnir's voice became an unctuous purr.
Come, I have good silver. I will buy her from you.
Njal straightened, damp beard bristling. There was a righteous fury in his eyes as he towered over Grimnir. The latter did not quail.
You profane little wretch! God-forsaken piece of filth! She is a child of the Lord, not chattel to be traded. She?
Grimnir hissed. Njal dropped any pretense at hiding the truth. Idun was a woman.
Aye, she.
We go to Roskilde, she and I. Once there, she will serve the church as best she can, and none can be the wiser. It is God's will.
And what will they do to her when they find out her little secret? Eh?
That's none of your concern.
What will you do, Christine? That's the question. Will you raise your axe against them when they come for her? And they will, you know it. In your bones, I can smell the fear you carry for her. It rots in your faith, you filthy oath breaker. Repent to your nailed God and give the girl to me. I'll keep her safe.
Shut your mouth, you poisonous little worm! Njal rounded on the Skrelinger. Only the ancient bonds of hospitality kept his hand from Grimnir's throat. Go back to the shadows and pray to your foul gods that the next time we meet you don't leave this world with my axe buried in your miserable skull. She is my charge, and I will do everything I can to keep her safe. And I will die before I allow harm to come to her. Njal shouldered Grimnir aside. Grimnir snarled.
So be it.
Quick as a snake, he lashed out and kicked the Dane in the back of the left knee. That leg crumpled. The blow pitched Njal off balance before he could recover, before he could so much as react. A second kick caught him between the shoulder blades and drove him forward onto his face. Air whoofed from Njal's lungs. The Dane gasped. He struggled to draw breath even as he struggled to rise to fight back. Grimnir gave him no opportunity. Disdaining his sayax, he leapt full upon Njal's broad back, straddling him and driving his head into the stone floor of the cave. Cartilage crunched, bones spurted from the Dane's crushed nose. Tear-blind and roaring with rage, Njal thrashed like a wounded beast and lurched forward. He clawed at Grimnir if he could but get his hands on him. Grimnir, though, was a relentless foe. He clung to the Dane's back and hammered blow after blow into the side of his head. Njal twisted. He staggered, blowing a bloody froth through his mashed lips. Grimnir's horny fist connected once more, crushing his eye socket and bruising the soft flesh of his temple. Njal crashed to his knees, and in that instant Grimnir gained both purchase and leverage. Iron fingers closed around the Dane's neck and choked off his bellows of agony. Ooh, that was nasty. That tells you this is a bit of a grim, dark story. But it's good. It's a good story. Give me 1 second. I just have to make some adjustments. My reading utensil, which is an iPad, needs a bit of charge. It's at 10%, so I just have to quickly plug her in, and then we'll be ready to go. All right. Actually, I might need to get a bit of water. Just for a quick second, I have to go upstairs and grab some. Grimnir's voice is rather hard on the throat here. So I will be right back, and I hope you're enjoying this. Not going flat, just getting scratchy. You notice how I'm not putting as much emphasis on it. So I will be right back. I'm going to get some water and I will come here. I don't want to kill my throat. I want to be able to talk yet tomorrow. BRB. Alright, we're back at it. Just give me 1 sec, gotta sit on down and we'll be good to go. There we are. Alright, ready? Chapter 5. After the previous day's storms, the morning that came to Sealand was crystalline. The woman who called herself Iden, for indeed she was a woman who had done a masterly job of passing herself off as a rosy-cheeked young man, shaded her eyes and looked back down the road the way they had come the day before. She imagined she could almost see the combers breaking on the beach at Seal Reef, where a ship bound for the Isle of Borgund in the Baltic Sea had put them ashore. Ahead of her, through the scrub and the trees, a glittering blue fjord cut through the heart of Sealand. Into the south on her left, the hills rose a few hundred more feet before dropping down into a shallow, wooded valley. On the horizon she could see the smudges of smoke that marked villages and steadings. The wind was unseasonably cold. Shivering despite the brilliant sunlight, she skidded down the hillside to the ruddled trail. Puddles from yesterday's rain still stood, their edges crusted with ice. She found a fresh hoofprint in the mud and discovered that, by an act of providence, the donkey had not strayed far. The animal stood near a thicket, its rope lead tangled in the thorns. The donkey's ears twisted and flattened as she approached. It was wary. Scared, she purposely kept her voice low, cooing and speaking as to a child, rather than with the thundering hellfire and brimstone that the stubborn beast deserved. It allowed her to take its headstall. Working the lead free of the thorns, she noticed a curious thing about it. The lead did not look frayed as from chewing, but rather it looked cut, and cleanly at that. So too were the donkey's hobbles. Immediately her suspicions lit upon Grimnir. She recalled him sitting there, smugly honing his sayax. But why? Why would he try to drive off their donkey? It made no sense. She heard it then, over the keening wind, an agonized roar like the voice of a wounded beast. Already skittish, the donkey took fright at the sound and bolted from her grip. It knocked her off balance. Unable to recover, She fell to her hands and knees on the frosty trail bed. Stones bore into her palms. She watched as the donkey galloped off in the direction of Roskilde. Another cry, choked off in its crescendo, drew her eyes up to the cave mouth. The blood left her face as she recognized the voice. "Merciful God!" she muttered. Scrambling to her feet, she ran back up the slope and ducked under the hawthorn boughs. "Njal!" It took her a moment for her eyes to adjust to the gloom. She pressed on recklessly, one hand on the cave wall as she flew down the stairs. "Njal!" But what she saw there in the shadows by the pool drew a grasp from her. Grimnir straddled Njal. His black-nailed hands looped around his throat, choking the life from him, and the look on the Skraelinger's face was one of savage exultation. "Lord God Almighty, no!" Even as she reached the cave floor, though she knew she was too late, Grimnir's muscled arms shook and convulsed. She slammed Njal's face into the ground. He slammed Njal's face into the ground, using the momentum to propel himself to his feet. Grimnir snatched Njal by the shoulder and flung him on his back. The woman calling herself Idun cried out at the sight of the Dane's bloody face, his nose mashed and his eye socket deformed. Most of all she cried out when she saw that distended tongue like that of a hanged man and the fixed, bulging eye. She cried because she knew in that moment that Njal was dead. Grimnir threw his head back and gave a terrible howl of triumph, a godless barbarian gloating over his kill. As the echo of that hideous sound died away, his gleaming red eyes turned toward her. "Foundling," he hissed. Her legs trembled beneath her and gave way. Why run? Where would she go? Who would defend her from a beast that, if trusty, fell-handed Njal could not? "Trust in God," a voice murmured in the back of her mind. "Trust in God Most High. Trust in the Lord Most High." There on her knees she made the sign of a cross and bowed her head. I am the wheat of God, and am ground by the teeth of wild beasts. I long after the Lord, the Son of the true God and Father, Jesus Christ. I am eager to die for the sake of Christ." 2 steps brought Grimnir to her side. She squeaked in terror as he caught her up by the throat and slammed her into the cave wall. His grip choked off her cry. Lights danced before her eyes. His grip choked her cry. Lights danced before her eyes. "You hymn singers are also eager to meet death. Do that little god you love a favor and meet death on your feet. Make that bastard work for his supper." And with his free hand, Grimnir groped under her robes. She twisted away from that probing hand, fighting and clawing. She felt sickened as he touched her sex, but he did no more. He brought his hand away and held his fingers up before her eyes. The tips were red with blood. Her blood. The blood of her cycle. "So we understand each other," he growled, using his red-smeared fingers to sketch the sigil of the eye on her forehead. "I know what you are. I have marked you like I marked my cave, little fool. I killed your protector. You belong to me now. What's your name, eh? Your real name?" "Etain," she said. "My name is Etain." Grimnir nodded and turned her loose. She slid to the cave floor where she lay, wiping her forehead and sobbing when he went over and rooted through the panniers, holding their belongings as if they were the spoils of his victory. He set their food to one side, pocketed what little coin he found wrapped in one of Njal's old shirts, and smashed the carved cross to kindling. He flung books and scrolls carelessly about and scattered a sheaf of fine vellum meant as a gift to Father Gunnar and Roskilde. but carefully put the 2 pottery jars of ink down beside the food. Etain stifled her sobs. "You are a servant of God," she muttered to herself, "not some weeping victim. Get up!" Her jaw set and resolute, she rose to her feet on unsteady legs and staggered over to where Njal fell. She knelt beside him. Fresh tears cascaded down her cheeks without recrimination. He had been her first captor after the sack of Exeter, then her protector, and finally her companion in Christ. And in the small hours of the night, where her sin grew too large to bear, Njal had been the father she never knew, taking her in his arms and comforting her, singing to her as one might to a child. She closed his eyes, arranged his limbs. "God, our Father," Etain whispered, making the signs of the cross. "Your power brings us to birth. Your providence guides our lives, and to your command we return to dust."
"Why do you weep, foundling? Is he not sitting at your nail god's right hand now?" "Ha! I did that old breaking swine a favor."
Wow, this voice is really messing with my throat. Alright, here we go. "He broke no oaths," she replied. "Not like you. You offered us hospitality and then murder us when it suits you. May my God and yours curse you."
"My hospitality ended with sunrise,"
Grimnir said, kicking the now empty panniers over.
"And I'd wager when that one was born his idiot father pledged him in the service of that tyrant Odin, an oath he likely renewed when he sailed with that fool Olaf. What happened to that oath when he took up your white Christ?"
"An oath to a false god is no oath."
"False, eh? You sure?"
Grimnir turned in a circle, his arms held wide, the bone discs and silver beads woven into his long hair clattered as he threw his head back and shouted to the heavens.
"I struck down your sword, man, you cross-hanging bastard! Where's your swift and terrible vengeance? Here I am. Do you fear me?"
The echo of Grimnir's challenge faded away.
Just like I thought."
Etain stood, fists balled at her sides. Her eyes were the cold blue of a glacier. "What about your precious Odin? Where is he? Will he not defend his name? Will he not strike?" Without warning, the back of Grimnir's hand cracked across her mouth. She staggered, and would have fallen had he not pressed closer and seized her jaw in his black-nailed hands and dragged her close enough to smell his rank breath. Red eyes bored into blue. Oh, of course, I hope you enjoyed it. This will be going on for a while, and of course you can listen to the rest of it later. Thanks for stopping by.
There you see, insult your nail god and nothing happens. But insult the gods of the north and their vengeance is swift, little fool.
That's probably a good idea. He shoved her away. She caught herself before she could fall. Grimnir vanished into the shadows at the back of the cave, only to emerge later bearing his own gear. A satchel of age-blackened leather hung with all manner of fetishes. Strings of wolf and bear teeth, human finger bones carved with runes, red and gold-haired scalps of shriveled strips of skin still hanging off them. Ugh. The satchel bore a painted eye sigil, but beneath that, stamped into the leather, were the faint emblem of a bull's head and the Latin letters Legio XIX. Legion 19. Etain watched him stow the things he had taken from her own, and Njal's possessions in various places, then slide Njaal's axe through the thongs that tied down the satchel's flap. He worked quickly. Once finished, he knelt there and stared hard at her. She could see the mechanisms of thought grinding away behind that wolfish face. "Will you kill me now?" she said after a moment. "Or do you plan on selling me to the heathen?"
"You're English,"
he replied, rising. She apprehended his meaning. "I will not go with you. I must bury Njaal and be on my way." Etain knelt once more beside Njaal's corpse, as if expecting him to protect her now as he always had. They are awaiting us in Roskilde." Grimnir's hand dropped to the worn hilt of the seax.
"Oh, you'll do this and you'll not do that, eh? That's enough from you. The only question is, do you walk, or do I truss you up like a pig and drag you to England?"
Etain sat with her head bowed, her eyes closed in prayer. Was this to be her lot in life? To return to a land she hated, as much a captive now as when she left it, perhaps more so? She asked God for a sign, but the only answer was a click, click, click of Grimnir's fingernails as he tapped impatiently on the pommel of his seax.
"Well?"
Finally Etain opened her eyes. "I will come quietly," she said, "if first you help me bury him." Grimnir looked from her to the corpse and back again.
"Your word. Swear it by your nailed god."
"I swear it," she said. Before she could even so much as move, Grimnir had crossed the space between them and knotted his fingers in her copper hair. He hauled her to her feet and bent her head back at a cruel angle. She gasped.
"You break your oath?"
he hissed.
"And my hand will be the weapon of your wretched little Christ's retribution, as easily as it was the weapons of Odin's. You understand?"
Etain nodded. Suddenly she felt herself praying for the end of days. Whew, this is really intense. Chapter 6. If Etain thought Grimnir would go out, hack a hole in the stony ground, and help her lower Njaal's body into it, she was mistaken. Instead, he took the Dane's axe off his pack and attacked the dead tree, felling it in no time at all. He worked effortlessly, shearing off branches and sectioning the gnarled trunk with blows powerful enough to split an iron-rimmed shield. She watched and wondered, and then it hit her. She had a horrified image of Njaal laid out on a pyre like his heathen ancestors. He was going to burn him! "No!" she cried. "He must be buried! Buried in the ground, his body whole and unburned! His head must face east, so that we might look upon the rising sun and witness the coming of Christ on Judgment Day." Grimnir paused in his effort. He spat. For an instant he looked as though he might argue with her, but then he cast his gaze up and around. Something he saw satisfied him. He motioned to her.
"Arrange his limbs, then. Make him pretty for the coming of your nailed god."
He sank the axe in the dead wood and sat on the stump. Etain frowned at him, but she went to where Grimnir had scattered their possessions and gathered the few things: his blanket, a flask of water, 2 squares of fine linen that had protected the strewn vellum, that slender codex with stained leather covers, an incomplete recension of the Gospel of St. John, which she had been using to teach him Latin, and pieces of the broken cross. The sight of those fragments tore a sob from her breast. He'd been so proud of it. Now, to see his loving handiwork wrecked was almost too much to bear. She brought these things to his side. His body was still warm, the joints pliant, as she reverently put his feet together and brought his arms to his sides. She straightened his head. Moistening one of the linen squares, she cleaned the blood from his face as best she could. Etain used the other square to shroud Njaal's proud visage. She wrapped his blanket around him to lay the codex with splinters of their cross in his chest.
"East is that way,"
Grimnir muttered, pointing at the back of the cave. "He must face east once he's in the earth," she snapped. "There must be good ground nearby, perhaps down by one of the beaches on the fjord." Grimnir stood and walked to where Njaal's body lay. Njaal moved aside. Reaching down, he grabbed the Dane by his ankles and dragged him round to where his feet pointed east.
"He's in the earth,"
Grimnir said flatly.
"No sense lugging his carcass around. Gather what you need and let's be off. You wasted enough time."
"You mean leave him here? You vile wretch! You said you would help me bury him."
"Aye, and we have. In a barrow fit for the king."
"Barrow?" said Etain. "This is no barrow. It's nothing but—" Grimnir cut her off.
"It's a barrow if I say it's a barrow. If you don't like it, you can back the useless bastard. Choose."
It was no choice, really. Etain knew it, and she was half convinced the Skrailingar knew it too. Burning the body was anathema. Without a body, how could poor Njaal rise from the dead to be reunited with his soul when Judgment Day dawned? No, his tomb must be this cave in the wilderness, a tomb no less humble than that of the Redeemer himself. Etain sighed. She crouched beside Njaal's body and gently put his limbs back in order. Leaning down, she kissed his brow through the linen shroud. "Our journey is at an end, my beloved friend," she whispered. "Go with God and dwell forever in the magnificence of the Lord." But as she made to stand, something happened. Something that filled her with equal measures of hope and dismay. A low moan escaped Njaal's lips. The sound caused her spine to go rigid. She cast a surreptitious glance over her shoulder to see if her captor had heard it. Grimnir, though, was busy rooting once more through the detritus of their belongings. He had taken upon it himself to gather a few things he deemed to be hers and was stuffing them in a sack. Etain quickly turned to Njaal. She hesitated and then placed a trembling hand upon his chest, as if offering a silent benediction. Though weak, her heart thudded in its cage of bone. Etain drew her hands back as though burned. "God's teeth!" she muttered, unsure now what to do. One thing was certain. Grimnir would finish him off if he got close enough to realize Njaal's yet lived. But what would he die? Would he die regardless if she left his wounds untended? The next agonizing seconds seemed to stretch on for hours as Etain tried to divine the will of God, but it was through Skrailingar that his desires became manifest.
"Get up,"
snapped Grimnir.
"You've been out there long enough. We're wasting daylight."
And with sudden clarity, Etain knew what course she must follow. She had to commend Njaal to God's keeping and go with Grimnir. To stay meant risking the death for both of them. This way at least one of them would survive. She nodded. Leaning over him once more, she whispered, "Come find me, Red Njaal, son of Hjalmar, slayer of Prince Eothred of Wareham, and the scourge of Exeter. Come find me, if God wills it." And with a last kiss on his brow, Etain rose to her feet and turned to face Grimnir. "I am ready." He tossed her the bag with her belongings, caught up his pack, and jerked his head up to the cave entrance.
"You first."
With a silent prayer, she pushed past Grimnir and clambered up the stone steps, leaving Njaal to his fate. "And me to mine," she thought, glancing back down at his prostrate form, "until God sees fit to weave them together once more." And with that, I am going to say we will continue on from chapter 7 onward in our next reading stream. I think this will be a good book to read. I'm very excited to share it with you. I read it very voraciously a week and a half ago, and I'm eager to share its very good story. Intriguing characters. Yeah, let's just crack my neck there. There we go. It's intriguing characters very strongly. I hope you enjoyed it, and this has been the Wagon Meister Stream Reading Edition. I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe on YouTube. Give it a follow if you're on Twitch. And in the various social media things, please give me a follow, either on my Instagram or my Twitter or my Facebook, all which are linked in the descriptions in the YouTube doobly-doo or in my bio description. I hope everyone had a good time, and I will see you in the